Marcus Chen thought he'd finally figured out the dating game. At 32, after years of failed relationships and near misses, he'd developed what he called his system, a careful approach to dating that protected his heart while staying open to real connection. He had rules, boundaries, standards. Then Sophia walked into the networking event at that boutique hotel in downtown Portland, and every single rule went out the window. She wasn't just beautiful. Beautiful women had approached Marcus before. Sophia had something else, this magnetic presence that made everyone in the room subtly orient themselves toward her. She wore confidence like perfume, and when she laughed at something her colleague said, Marcus found himself smiling without knowing why. He'd been nursing a whiskey at the bar halfway through a conversation with a potential client when Sophia appeared beside him to order a drink. Their eyes met in the mirror behind the bar. "The Macallan 18, neat," she told the bartender, then turned to Marcus. "I'm guessing you're not really interested in whatever that guy's pitching?" Marcus glanced at his conversation partner, who was indeed mid-pitch. "That obvious? Your eyes glazed over about 3 minutes ago. I'm Sophia." "Marcus. And yeah, he lost me at synergistic value proposition." She laughed, genuinely, not that polite networking chuckle everyone uses. "You work in tech too?" "Cybersecurity consultant." "You?" "Digital marketing. I help companies that don't know they're dying figure out they're dying, then charge them obscene amounts of money to save them." The brutal honesty caught him off guard. Most people in this industry wrap themselves in corporate speak. That's refreshingly direct. Life's too short for bullshit. She collected her drink from the bartender. "Also too short to spend networking events talking to people who bore us. Want to get out of here?" Red flag number 1. She moved too fast, pushing for immediate intimacy before any foundation existed. But Marcus didn't see it as a red flag. He saw it as confidence, initiative, someone who knew what she wanted and went for it. They ended up at a late-night ramen place Sophia knew, talking until the restaurant started stacking chairs. She told him about growing up in Seattle, about her complicated relationship with her mother, about the startup she had helped build from nothing that got acquired for 8 figures. She asked questions that actually mattered. Not, "What do you do?" but "What makes you feel alive?" "I restore vintage motorcycles," Marcus found himself saying. "My garage is basically a shrine to British engineering from the 70s. That's sexy. "Most women think it's a midlife crisis." "Most women are boring." Sophia leaned forward. "Show me sometime?" Red flag number 2. She mirrored his interests too perfectly, claiming instant fascination with topics she'd never mentioned before. They started dating. If you could call it dating. It felt more like falling, that weightless, breathless sensation where you're not sure if you're flying or just plummeting toward impact. Sophia texted constantly. Good morning messages with photos of her coffee, random thoughts throughout the day, late-night voice notes when she couldn't sleep. Marcus had always been someone who valued space in relationships, who believed healthy partners maintained independent lives. But with Sophia, the constant contact felt different. It felt like being seen, chosen, like someone finally wanted him as much as he'd always wanted to be wanted. Red flag number 3. She demanded constant communication and made him feel guilty when he didn't respond immediately. "Sorry, I didn't text back faster," he said one evening after she had sent 3 increasingly concerned messages when he was in a client meeting. "Work got crazy." "I just worry when I don't hear from you." Her voice went soft, vulnerable. "My ex used to ignore me for hours, and then I'd find out he was with someone else. I know you're not him, but, old wounds." Marcus felt like an asshole. "I'm sorry. I should have just sent a quick 'in a meeting' text." "Would you? That would really help me feel secure." He added her to his phone's VIP list so her texts would break through Do Not Disturb. Small adjustment. Relationships required compromise. Red flag number 4. She used past trauma to manipulate his behavior and erode his boundaries. 3 weeks in, Sophia started leaving things at his apartment. A toothbrush, then a change of clothes, then half her closet, it seemed. Marcus's carefully curated minimalist space started feeling like someone else's home. "Is this too much?" she asked one morning, gesturing at the growing collection of her belongings. I can take it back if you need your space. But the way she said it, like she was already preparing for rejection, for him to be like every other person who'd let her down, made Marcus want to prove he was different. No, it's fine. It's nice having you here. Her smile was radiant. Yeah? Yeah. Red flag number 5. She moved into his space without clear discussion or invitation, establishing territory through incremental occupation. By week 5, Sophia had a key. By week 7, she was there more nights than not. Marcus's friends started commenting. Dude, isn't this moving kind of fast? His best friend Jake asked over beers one Thursday, one of the few nights Marcus had maintained for their standing weekly hangout. When you know, you know. That's what you said about Rachel, and before that, about... This is different. Sophia's different. Jake studied him. You look tired, man. Marcus was tired. Sophia's sleep schedule was erratic. She'd wake him at 2 a.m. to talk about ideas for her business or want to drive to the coast to watch the sunrise. His morning gym routine had evaporated. He was eating worse, sleeping less, but he told himself this was what passion felt like. This was what it meant to be truly alive with someone. Red flag number 6. She disrupted his self-care routines and patterns, isolating him from the life that sustained him. Jake thinks we're moving too fast, Marcus mentioned to Sophia that night. Her expression cooled. Jake's been single for what, 3 years since Amanda left him? 2 years, and that's not really... I'm just saying, maybe he's not the best person to take relationship advice from. He seems kind of bitter, honestly, and he never liked me. He doesn't know you yet, because you keep us separate. Why is that? She wasn't angry, just curious, hurt. I really wanted your friends to like me because you matter to me and the people you care about matter to me. Marcus found himself caught between two worlds. Give it time, he'll come around. But the next week he went to Thursday beers alone. And the week after that, Sophia had planned something for them. And then the standing beer night just faded. Red flag number 7. She systematically isolated him from friends by creating drama and emotional crises whenever he maintained outside relationships. 2 months in, Marcus noticed Sophia was always short on money, despite supposedly running a successful consulting business. Dinner bills, her half of weekend trips, even her phone bill. There was always a reason she couldn't cover her share right now. A client who hadn't paid yet, a delayed wire transfer, her business account being temporarily frozen. I'll pay you back next week. I just hate asking you for money. It makes me feel like such a failure. Marcus told himself he was just being supportive. She'd done the same for him, hadn't she? Except when he thought about it, he couldn't remember a single time she'd actually paid for anything. But she was always so grateful, so aware of the imbalance, so determined to make it up to him. How could he possibly bring up something so petty as money? His credit card bills were climbing. His savings account was shrinking. But every time doubt crept in, Sophia would do something that reminded him why he was doing this. A handwritten note telling him he was the best thing that ever happened to her. Showing up at his office with lunch because she just wanted to see his face. Sex that made him forget his own name. Red flag number 9. She used intermittent reinforcement, sporadic grand gestures that made him crave her approval and ignore consistent patterns of taking. 3 months in, Marcus's boss called him into a closed-door meeting. Your work is slipping, David said without preamble. The Morrison account, you missed 2 deadlines. The security audit you submitted last week had errors I've never seen from you. What's going on? Marcus felt like he'd been punched. His work had always been his anchor, the one thing he could control. I'll fix it. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking what's happening. This isn't like you. The truth is, Marcus was exhausted. Sophia's constant needs, emotional, financial, physical, left him running on empty. But admitting that felt like admitting failure. Personal stuff. I'll handle it. David's expression softened. Marcus, you're one of my best people, but I need to know you're handling it, because right now it looks like you're drowning. Red flag number 10. His performance in all other areas of life was declining, but he kept telling himself it was temporary. That night, Marcus tried to talk to Sophia about needing more balance, more sleep, more time to focus on work. Of course, she said immediately. I've been selfish. I just love being with you so much, I forget you have other responsibilities. I'm sorry. She moved back to her apartment, which Marcus realized he'd never actually been to. Always some reason it wasn't convenient. For 3 days. 3 days of sparse texts and cool call phone calls. 3 days of Marcus feeling like he was being punished for asking for space. On day 4, she showed up at his door at midnight, crying. Her landlord was evicting her. She had nowhere to go. Could she stay with him? Just until she figured things out. Red flag number 11. She manufactured crises that required his rescue, ensuring he could never establish boundaries without feeling cruel. Sophia moved in fully, not as a girlfriend gradually integrating into his life, but as a sudden, total occupation. Her stuff everywhere, her schedule becoming his schedule, her problems becoming his problems. She started helping with his work, sitting in on his client calls, offering unsolicited advice on his projects. At first, Marcus appreciated the interest. Then he realized she was undermining him. I'm just trying to support you, she said when he gently suggested she let him handle his own clients. I thought you seemed so stressed. I thought I could help. Red flag number 12. She inserted herself into his professional life, blurring boundaries and compromising his autonomy. 4 months in, Marcus barely recognized his life. He'd stopped going to the gym entirely. His garage, his sanctuary, sat unused, the vintage Triumph he'd been restoring gathering dust. He was thousands of dollars in debt. His best friend wasn't returning his calls. His work performance had a formal improvement plan attached to it. And Sophia? She was there every moment, a constant presence that somehow made him feel more alone than he'd ever felt. Are you happy? Jake asked him in a rare moment they managed to connect over text. He typed out, yes, and stared at it. Deleted that. Tried, I think so. Deleted that too. Finally sent, I don't know anymore. Jake's response was immediate. That's your answer right there, brother. Red flag number 13. He couldn't honestly say he was happy, but had invested so much that admitting failure felt impossible. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday. Marcus came home early from a client site, exhausted from a meeting that had gone sideways. He needed quiet, space, just an hour to decompress. Sophia was in his home office, on his computer, his work laptop. What are you doing? She jumped, guilty. I needed to check something for a client and my laptop died. But Marcus had already seen the screen. His email, open, scrolled to a thread with Jake. You're reading my emails? I wasn't reading them, She saw his face and her expression shifted. Not apologetic, defensive, almost calculating. Okay, yes, I was checking to see if Jake has been talking shit about me, because I know he has been. That's not the point. Those are private. Private? Her voice went sharp, a tone he'd never heard before. Or maybe he'd seen it all along and just hadn't let himself believe it. She wasn't hurt. She wasn't scared. She was angry that he'd caught her. I was trying to protect us, she said, voice flat now. No tears, no vulnerability. I'm too weak to see when people are trying to poison you against me. Someone has to look out for you. By invading my privacy? By doing what you're too weak to do. You know what? Fuck this. I've given up everything for you. I moved in here. I've been nothing but supportive while you're spiraling at work. I've put up with your judgmental friends and your boring life. Boring life? You've been draining my bank account and isolating me from everyone I care about. Oh, here we go. The money. You've been keeping track. That's so romantic, Marcus. Really makes me feel valued. The gaslighting was so blatant now, so undisguised, that Marcus couldn't believe he'd missed it before. Or hadn't missed it. Red flag number 15. When the mask finally dropped, he realized every single warning sign had been there from day one, and he deliberately ignored them all. "I want you out," Marcus said quietly. "Tonight." Sophia laughed. Actually laughed. "You're going to regret this. You know that, right? I'm the best thing that ever happened to your pathetic life. Without me, you're just going to go back to being that lonely guy nursing whiskey at networking events, pretending you have it all figured out." She was probably right about that. Marcus knew he'd be lonely, knew he'd doubt this decision at 3 a.m. when the bed felt too big and too empty. But he also knew, with sudden crystal clarity, that lonely was better than this, that being alone with himself was better than being erased by someone else. He said, "Pack your things. I'll be in my garage." He walked out of the office, down the stairs, through the door to his garage. The Triumph sat there, half-assembled, exactly where he'd left it 4 months ago. Another life, another version of Marcus who'd had time and energy and a self that belonged to him. He sat down on the cold concrete floor and let himself feel the weight of what he'd done, what he'd let happen. Every ignored red flag, every rationalized boundary violation, every friend he'd pushed away, every routine he'd abandoned, every piece of himself he'd handed over like it didn't matter. It took Sophia 2 hours to pack. She slammed doors, made sure he could hear her crying and cursing. He heard her on the phone with someone, probably spinning the story, positioning herself as the victim. That was fine. She could tell whatever story she wanted. Marcus stayed in the garage, running his hand over the Triumph's cold metal until he heard the front door slam. Her car starting, driving away. Then he sat in the silence. His silence. His space. His life. Damaged, but still his. His phone buzzed. "Jake. You okay?" Marcus stared at the message. How did Jake know? Unless Jake had been watching this whole time, waiting for Marcus to see what he'd been too deep inside to see. He typed, "No, but I will be. Jake. Beer Thursday? Like old times?" "Yeah, Thursday." Marcus set the phone down and looked at his motorcycle. It would take months to finish the restoration, to rebuild everything Sophia had taken apart. The bike, his savings, his friendships, his self-respect. But he'd do it. Because the alternative, going back to being the person who ignored every warning sign, who chose the fantasy of being wanted over the reality of being consumed, that person was worse than lonely. That person was lost. The truth is, Marcus had made every classic dating mistake in 4 months. He'd moved too fast because the intensity felt like passion. He'd ignored his friends because she made him feel chosen. He'd abandoned his boundaries because holding them felt mean. He'd rationalized financial manipulation as supporting someone he loved. He had accepted isolation as intimacy. And Sophia, she wasn't a monster. She was just someone who'd learned that men like Marcus, smart, successful, lonely men who'd convinced themselves they had it all figured out, were the easiest marks. They wanted so badly to believe in the perfect connection that they'd ignore every red flag until the entire relationship was just red flags. And by then, they'd invested too much to walk away without feeling like failures. Marcus's biggest mistake wasn't falling for Sophia. It was falling for the version of himself that Sophia reflected back. The chosen one, the rescuer, the guy who was finally getting what he deserved. He'd been so hungry for that validation that he'd been willing to trade everything real for something that only felt real. 6 months later, Marcus would finish the Triumph. He'd rebuild his savings and his friendships. He'd learn that loneliness isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Losing yourself trying to avoid loneliness is worse. And he'd develop a new rule for himself. If you're ignoring red flags because someone makes you feel special, that feeling is the biggest red flag. Because the truth is, the right person doesn't make you smaller to fit into their life. They expand to make room for the life you already have. And if you're constantly defending your relationship to yourself, you're not in love. You're just afraid to admit you made a mistake. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. But at least he learned it while he still had a self to come back to. Some people ignore the red flags until there's nothing left of them but the wreckage. The truth is, Marcus had made every classic dating mistake in 4 months. He'd moved too fast because the intensity felt like passion. He'd ignored his friends because she made him feel chosen. He'd abandoned his boundaries because holding them felt mean. He'd rationalized financial manipulation as supporting someone he loved, and he'd accepted isolation as intimacy. And Sophia? She wasn't a monster. She was just someone who'd learned that men like Marcus, smart, successful, lonely men who'd convinced themselves they had it all figured out, were the easiest marks. They wanted so badly to believe in the perfect connection that they'd ignore every red flag until the entire relationship was just red flags, and by then they'd invested too much to walk away without feeling like failures. Marcus's biggest mistake wasn't falling for Sophia. It was falling for the version of himself that Sophia reflected back, the chosen one, the rescuer, the guy who was finally getting what he deserved. He'd been so hungry for that validation that he'd been willing to trade everything real for something that only felt real. 6 months later, Marcus would finish the triumph. He'd rebuild his savings and his friendships. He'd learn that loneliness isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Losing yourself trying to avoid loneliness is worse. And he'd develop a new rule for himself. If you're ignoring red flags because someone makes you feel special, that feeling is the biggest red flag of all. Because the truth is, the right person doesn't make you smaller to fit into their life. They expand to make room for the life you already have. And if you're constantly defending your relationship to yourself, you're not in love. You're just afraid to admit you made a mistake. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, but at least he learned it while he still had a self to come back to. Some people ignore the red flags until there's nothing left of them but the wreckage.